So if we can just maybe look at your priorities at the moment, the things you believe are important. And here it requires a lot of honesty with self as to how to know what is important to you. The primary way of measuring what is important to you is by measuring how long or how much time you spend at it. So what I would like you to do is to ask yourself, where do you spend your time? So if we're honest with ourselves, how is our time mostly utilised? You want to help me out with that? How do you find your time being utilised? So if you look over the course of a day, in a day you've got 24 hours, but shall we say the average person sleeps hopefully around 8 hours, shall we say? So there's 8 hours gone. 8 hours is sleep. Sleep's a very important time for you because you're learning the spirit world when you're asleep. So you've got 8 hours where you're learning to interact in a different environment, right? So that's good for you. Of course, if you get less sleep, then obviously you get less education in your sleep as well. So obviously getting a good amount of sleep is important for your day-to-day life. But with 8 hours, we've now got 16 hours. So how do you spend it?
Listening to divine truth.
Now let's go up the back, listening to divine truth.
In addiction and in fear.
Okay, so for many of us, we live in a state of addiction, don't we? So let's look at our addictions. Now, we might just, before we look at our addictions, let's take away a few things that we do. Like, you have to wash yourself in the course of a day, probably. So that's what? It depends how dirty you are. But maybe 15 minutes, shall we say? And then you've got to feed yourself in the course of a day. Should we say that's like, well, it depends how fussy with your food you are, I suppose, isn't it? But let's say that's 15 minutes each time, shall we? And if you really like draw it out, might be 20, 25 minutes. But let's say all eating per day, 1 hour.
In Europe, it's more.
In Europe. Is that from experience, Pierre?
How much time should we allow for you?
It depends. If you go to France, it's probably 2 hours or 3 hours.
Oh, but
it's
that's
very important.
socialising. That's different than eating,
okay.
isn't it?
Just pure eating.
Pure eating is just like tom tom tom. Done, isn't it? It's the talking in between that takes the time. Yeah, but still probably only an hour for just eating, right? Then you've got to sit on the toilet occasionally. Yeah, hopefully once a day at least. Yeah. So should we give that a long time? 15 minutes. So that gets rid of the refuse that your body's producing. Yeah. So what are we up to now? What else do you need to do? Work. Well, let's look at work. How much do you need it versus how much you do it? It's a good question, isn't it? But let's say the average person spends, what would you spend here? Like in Australia, it'd be like 8 hours. Would it be about that here? Yeah. Yep, okay. 8 hours working, so that's work. Okay. But it's not every day, is it? Hopefully not. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What else? Running the children around from sport to what? That's gonna, for the average person, that takes quite a long time. But we got to question whether it's necessary. But let's look at that. There's in amongst there 9.5 hours. that also, doesn't that tell us a lot about how we feel about economy, about money, and our worry about our welfare? The fact that we already spend half of our waking time worrying about the money side of things is interesting in itself, isn't it? But 9.5 hours, what does that give us? Spare time? 6.5 hours? So let's just look at those 6.5 hours. How do you spend them? Shopping. What else? Knitting. Watching telly. Sports. Driving around the countryside, having a look, trying to keep you busy. Going to the coffee shop. Walking dog. When you start looking at the time, what would our use of time indicate about how important we see our relationship with God? Can you see? Already there's indications, isn't there, that what we believe is sincerity is frequently not as sincere as we believe it to be. Because there are things that we could do to change our life to actually have more time with God, more time to develop that relationship with God. The relationship with God requires us not only thinking about and feeling about God's nature, but it also requires about feeling about and thinking about and developing our human soul as well. And it's really quite sad in a way that we've only left 6.5 hours to do that in the course of a day when it's the most important thing we could do with our life. Now, we do need to take responsibility for our own financial welfare. We do. But how much of that do we need to do? That's a good question, isn't it? For many of us, we need to have a stockpile in the bank or a stockpile of resources available to us before we even start to feel a little bit safe financially, right? And that indicates actually that we have a large amount of fear about money, worry about our day-to-day living expenses in life. So what happens is our feeling and thinking time and our desire to connect to this God sort of becomes not as real to us anymore. We don't treat it as a real thing, something that we need to be doing on a daily basis in terms of establishing that relationship. So to have a relationship with God, the way I sort of see it is it's not a, time off thing. It's a constant thing. There's every single moment of the day you can involve and feel and have feelings for God. You can. Majority of us don't. And that's why we often don't have a very strong connection to God or a very strong connection to God's laws or principles or morals, is because we're not often thinking about God at all. So to have this relationship with God, it's going to require some emotional sincerity on our behalf. And if we have no faith that God is these things, can you see it's going to be very hard to develop that sincerity, isn't it? It's going to be very difficult. We're going to sort of feel like, I hope God exists. This is how many people on earth sort of are. They hope God exists, but they don't feel that God really does exist in their day-to-day life. And frequently there's very confusing things happening in their day-to-day life that they can't understand, and they attribute mistakenly to God or mistakenly to other things, and they have no idea how to resolve those things because the relationship with God isn't developed, and therefore, you can't get told how or what is going wrong with your life. In order for God to communicate with you, it's going to require a level of desire on your part. And when I say a level of desire, it has to be sincere. And what I see in the Western world in particular, but now it's pretty much the whole earth now, addictions is what everybody's sincere about. Meeting their demands and addictions is the thing that they concern themselves or worry about the most. And so God really takes, if any place at all, definitely a second place, but usually way down the list. Normally what happens is the average person firstly thinks and feels about their own welfare. In other words, we are quite self-absorbed and selfish, right? Then we think about our family welfare. In other words, the people we believe are our family. So that usually means blood relatives or married or children, rather than seeing the whole world of humanity as our family. So we think about our immediate family welfare. And then it's very rare when you think about it, usually we throw in some entertainment. Into there. And by the time you've done these things, can you see God is like an afterthought oftentimes?
Well, God's usually the person we turn to when our addictions with our
When
own-
these are going wrong.
Yes.
In other words, he's our disaster relief. You know? Yeah. So we sort of see God as our rescuer rather than our friend that we have constant communication with. Yep. And of course, the more we don't consider or contemplate the nature of God, and the more we feel a lack of faith in God, the less God gets considered. So can you see, without us developing some faith in God, it's going to be very, very hard, isn't it, to put forward any real motivation or effort into having a relationship with God. Yeah. And the usage of our time indicates this to us. If we are constantly involved in just day-to-day life and day-to-day activities, and we very rarely contemplate or even pray to God for anything, can you see, you could basically say that our feelings for God are very insincere, if that is the case. And if communication with God requires sincerity, and I am not as sincere as I would like to believe I am, can you see I'm going to have problems receiving love and giving love to God? There's not going to be a very close relationship. Yeah? Isn't it very interesting how very quickly you get down? Like, all I had to do is talk about the amount of hours a day, and all of a sudden, many of you have automatically just closed down emotionally to the subject. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Can you see, while we're talking about something external to us, we're pretty open, and we can even contemplate like things like God or existence or other spiritual concepts. But as soon as it's brought back to where do I stand with this, immediately a big shutdown comes over you emotionally. And of course, all that does is encourage a lot of spirits who are also shut down to come over you as well. And before you know it, the whole atmosphere in the room just goes from being quite, just before we left for lunch, quite buoyant. Yeah? And then I raise this issue and boom, the atmosphere is all of a sudden quite low. Yeah. We just have mics. Thank you. Now tomorrow we'll have to have different mic runners, won't we?
We will, to give these guys
Just
a
to
break.
give these guys a break.
For myself, I noticed that there was a lot of guilt, shame, some of those
Yep. So
emotions.
Yep.
And I had to shut it down for myself because otherwise I would be crying and I would be disturbing the room and talk. And
yeah,
so I guess that's what happened
yeah. No, you're spot on.
for myself.
For many, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Yep. For others, though, it's more angry. Like, why are you pointing out flaws in me for? Type of anger.
Should be inspiring
It should
me,
be
Jesus.
inspiring me, not pulling me
I
down.
need to recognize that.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else.
yeah. So you recognise that feeling too?
No,
and I
she
think
said she didn't
you didn't recognise that feeling?
No.
No. No, but it is there actually. yeah. So and it's very common, because the reason why it happens is because when we start having to contemplate our own issues, we are often much more resistive than contemplating God's issues. So we would like to believe that the fact that we don't communicate very much with God is God's fault. Right? Most of us would like to believe that. And the reason why we'd like to believe that is because we forget that God is all these things in preference to avoiding the emotions that we feel when somebody raises, well, this is why this isn't relationship thing isn't happening.
Can I also add, Dylan, that when when you point out how our time is being used, and many people recognise, oh yeah, he's right, yeah, I do have all these addictions, and I'm avoiding like God in my day-to-day life. Oftentimes that is a real downer because it really highlights the difference between this reality and the reality that I live in. So the lack of faith, that really it highlights immediately the lack of faith I feel in all the lovely things we talked about before lunch, doesn't it? And so and then often in my experience we go to guilt and shame to avoid that. You know, get down on myself rather than just feel the terrible feeling that I don't even know if everything he's saying is true, and I don't want to risk experimenting with that, because a lot of times this drives these things, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's also obviously other emotions too. Like obviously all of these emotions are covering emotions. They are not actual causal, what I would call emotions that cause a problem. They are emotions that are the effect of the problem. So often underneath those are more emotions that cause the problem, like sadness.
This lack of faith we have.
Lack of faith.
Yeah.
See, most of our problems we don't realise are actually more spiritual than we think they are. When I say spiritual, what I mean is they're soul-based qualities that we haven't developed. And so the on-flow effect of a soul-based quality we haven't developed is physical symptoms. So an example of that is a lack of faith is a soul quality. A lack of faith creates physical symptoms in our life. One of those physical symptoms is the way we use our time. You could say as a physical symptom of, or you could say proof of, the lack of faith in God. Because if you have a strong faith in God, you don't waste time doing unnecessary things in your life. You realise that every pursuit you have is driven by the love and desire you have to live in harmony with God's principles and laws. So you don't get, you could say, drawn away into side things that have no bearing on those matters in your life. You have a passion towards the one thing. So what happens is we often are in this state where we think we do, but we don't really believe these things. And inside of us instead, there's all these imbibed societal and family-based constructs about God that when we think of God, we have sort of oftentimes the opposite feeling. So instead of thinking God, for instance, is loving, we think God's punishing. And the majority of you have been brought up in a society that believes in a punishing God, right? We don't believe God is wise. In fact, the majority of you have been brought up in a society that believes God's stupid. Like that God does a whole heap of things that are unknowable and illogical and mysterious, right? This is what we're brought up to believe. We don't believe that God is consistent, and in particular, we don't believe his laws are consistent. So we think we can break them and be immune from the consequence, right? Because we don't believe in a predictable God with predictable laws. And as a result of these things, we start to have a lack of faith in God, and that lack of faith is then demonstrated in the way in which we use our time. So now we start using our time in a manner that basically, fundamentally on earth in particular, ignores the existence of God. In our day-to-day life, we're doing a whole heap of things, and God's sort of like an afterthought. Now, if God's okay with being your afterthought, so you don't have to feel bad if God is your afterthought, God's okay with that. He's not offended by being your afterthought. He's not offended by you only spending an hour with him a day. He's not like a demanding friend who goes, you only spent 1 hour with me today, I am not spending any time with you tomorrow because of that. He's not like that at all. He is happy to spend time with you when you're happy to spend time with him. He's not going to be punishing. He's not going to be punitive. He's not going to try to make your life hard, as many people do believe, if you don't spend enough time with him. Near where we're staying at Evo's house, which is in Brussels, there's these churches, right? And every hour they ring their bells. I don't know, that must be driving you guys nuts if you're living there, because it's like there's no peace. It's like a peaceful time with God, another bell goes off. Like, it's just like bang. And on Sunday, it's like 10 times worse. It's like ringing the bell there's a 6 o'clock mass and an 8 o'clock mass and a midday mass, and it's just a bang, 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 and it's all over the countryside. They're trying to force their religion on the whole countryside. You understand? It's a purposeful action taken completely out of harmony with God's principles to try to get people to go and worship God, ironically. Right? And there's a misunderstanding of God's nature in that. That's quite obvious. And here we are, you've been brought up in this environment, historically in Europe, the Christian environment is very powerful, still got very powerful influences in all sorts of areas of life in Europe. And it's influenced how you feel about God and the lack of faith you have about God as a feeling, even if you think it hasn't. And the proof that it has is how you use your time. Because if you really believe God was your friend, a constant companion, who you could speak to about any subject, who will give you love and you can love him or her, and you can feel God at any time and get answers from God, do you think that you'd be doing it 1 hour a day if you really felt it? Can you see? You wouldn't be, would you? You'd be doing it hours a day. In fact, like you'd be working away and praying at the same time. You'd be doing things physically, family, whatever, playing games, but you're praying at the same time, because you can do both at the same time. You can have feelings, which are prayers, at the same time as you do things, can't you? While I'm talking to you, I'm praying at the same time. Right? I want to pray at the same time because God can tell me what it is you need to talk about. what it is we need to talk about. So we can do all of these things at the same time, but only if you believe with your heart that God's listening, that God wants to have this relationship with you constantly. Yeah? And if we don't feel that, then of course how we use our time will be very intermittent. Our relationship with God will be hit and miss. It will be occasional. It will be, oh, I feel under stress now. Now I've got to talk to God. Or I feel like, oh, I just had a relationship breakup. I now need to talk to God. But all the time you had the relationship, you never talked to God at all, which is really the time you needed to talk to God to sort out issues in the relationship, right? So the way we think frequently is that God's there for the hard times, yeah, and not for every time.